Hey, I'm Matt Ockamp.
And I'm Pat Reber.
And this is Mutant Menace.
I'm Trish Toby with WARC reporting to you live from Westchester, New York, where there appears to be some sort of mutant menace on the loose.
Pat, do you want to know what just happened to me?
Yeah, from the video portal where I'm sitting, it looks like you were getting robbed. You had your hands up in the air. You were terrified.
So I was, you know how sometimes we play little X-Men sound effects on this show?
Yeah, sure.
Like that one. I was looking for, right before we started, I was looking for because I'm having trouble uploading them to the website. So I was looking for other ones real quick, and I came across a soundboard that said X-Men, and I hit the X-Men button, and it played the animated theme song.
Yeah.
And I hit the button again to stop it, and it wouldn't stop. And I was like, shit, okay, I'll just play another sound effect, like a short sound effect real quick, and it'll stop this one. And I played one that said Scream.
What?
And Patrick, it was so loud and it wouldn't stop. You would think it would just be like, at the end. But no, it was somebody screaming but they started screaming. It blew out my ears. And I was like, okay, I can endure this for the 2 seconds it'll take. And then they got a second breath and kept screaming. And so that's when I pulled off my headphones and held them up in the middle of the air. And then this guy was still, that was what? We're talking 6-7 seconds at this point.
Yeah, something like that.
And the man was still screaming. He was on his fourth breath. And I was like, oh, fuck, I could just close the tab.
Play it.
I will not. I refuse. I can't imagine using a soundboard where a scream lasts for 7-8 seconds when I turned it off. Could have been longer.
Maybe it's like a transition from one scene to another. You're using a scream and you need it to...
Oh, so you're running back, you're doing a live YouTube video, right? A Twitch stream, what have you. And you are running off screen to go do a costume change. And you hit the scream button right before you leave.
I was thinking more like A block to B block as you go to commercial.
What sort of Hollywood language is this?
A
block?
So yeah, I've been listening to some podcasts. No, you'd be like, hey, you're listening to Mutant Menace, and then kick it out and it slowly fades, and then stamps.com.
Kick out a really long scream. Well, you know what it would do? It would help you to identify where you should skip the podcast to.
Yeah. Well, you would want to run it for 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds then.
So, well, no, because you wouldn't want the scream to go the whole time. The scream indicates an ad is about to start, right?
Yeah, or that the ads have ended. Skipping ahead, and you have...
Yeah. You just wait till the very long, horrible scream. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you sit through the rest of it.
And it wasn't like a Wilhelm scream either. It was a guy at his computer who's like, I can do better. So anyway, this is Mutant Menace. It's a podcast where we read all the X-Men issues in a row, and me and Pat, we talk about them. How you been this week, Pat?
I've been all right. I had a nice weekend. I went to a dinner party. You and I grabbed a slice of pizza.
Please don't talk about our personal life on this podcast.
I went to a museum.
Whoa, shit. Tell me about your museum trip.
Yeah. I went to Magic Gardens in Philadelphia on South Street. A beautiful giant tile structure.
That's the one where it is a bunch of cement with stuff stuck in it. Artfully stuck into it.
Yes. Yeah. Tile.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a giant collage. It's really cool. If you're ever in Philadelphia, go to Magic Gardens.
It's not just tile, it's other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can often find ridiculous little things stuck in too. Like I remember like a little baby figurine stuck in head first, so there's just like a plastic butt sticking out of the wall.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a big cow's head, like a ceramic cow's head that I found.
That exists all over Philly, and I don't know, is it the same person when you go
Yes.
to
Isaiah Zagar. They just made a documentary about him, and I don't know where you would find it to watch it. But yeah, back in like the 70s, they wanted to plow over South Street, and a bunch of artists owned this space, and by tiling it up with his beautiful murals, he convinced the community to stand against bulldozing the block and turning it into expensive condos, I guess.
So that's amazing, and I know that he has done a bunch of other walls around the city.
Yeah.
But it's also a staple of the city that sometimes you'll just be walking down the street and there'll just be like a brick that is mosaic. Everything else is normal, and it's like a brick went missing, and now where it is a little collage stuck into cement. Is that also him, or is it just people in Philly identify with it, so sometimes they just take action figures, stick them in cement, and replace a brick with them?
I'm sure there are some...
I don't mean to be interviewing you about this like you're the expert on all of these things.
No, I just went to the museum. I read a pamphlet, so I'm sure there's some imitators. Is that rude? I assume homagers?
Homage. Well, I think it would be imitators if it was. I don't know.
I don't think they're claiming. I think that he's inspired other people to do this, but for the most part, those are him. Not to be confused with the Toynbee tiles, which also pop up all over the area.
Explain Toynbee tiles to me.
Oh boy, I'm going to get the lore wrong on this one, but it is a guy that makes really cool tiles and puts them... He's a cool guy, but I don't remember the reason, and I don't want to misattribute anything, but look him up. Toynbee tiles is another staple of the area.
Yeah. I don't want to just speak out of my ass on it, but there's a Wikipedia page about it. That's not... Here's the thing, though. This isn't what our podcast is about.
Oh, sort of a lifestyle podcast, I think.
If your lifestyle is reading every issue of the X-Men and talking about it with your friend, which ours actually is. So last week on the Mutant Menace, we met Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. We met the original 5 X-Men and Professor X. Somebody said Yabo. And now we are up to issue 7.
Matt, we didn't talk about your week.
Oh, my week? I had a weird week that isn't... okay, here's something. I am so close to finishing my anthropology degree.
Whoa.
I just wrapped up another semester. I had a sustainable communities course. Like I had to get some sociology credits in there. So I had a sustainable communities course that was using a textbook that was from 2012, which if you're taking biology or something, probably not that big of a deal, especially if you're not in the 400 levels or postgraduate levels. You're probably going to be okay learning the stuff they knew about biology in 2012. But if you're learning about sociology and something as dynamic as sustainability, a lot has fucking changed. So when I'm reading this and I'm reading about and the federal government just proposed a program to bring this environmental education to 50 cities across the United States, I'm like, there's no way this is still in place. After we're in the second Trump presidency, there's no way this is still in place. So everything in the book I had to go research. The editor had a blurb about how good Dr. Mehmet Oz is for American healthcare.
Oh no.
And American health education. It was so I'm pretty glad that course is over.
I'm going through a similar phenomenon as my wife and I watch through Vanderpump Rules. It starts in, I think it's around like 2012, 2013, and it's just, there's so much that they haven't been through, and you just know that they will be through, and you kind of hold your breath waiting for them to
Yeah.
stop sexually assaulting each other all the time because the Me Too movement sweeps through social media, or
They're
I
like,
think they're where we're at right now. They're about to hit COVID. I can't wait to see how
whoa.
they all react to that.
One of them probably had to come on and apologize for in season 1 when they were like, my best friend Harvey Weinstein got me this job. And
I know that a few of them get canceled. I don't know exactly why, but I'm sure we're getting there.
well, according to the Wikipedia, only one of them has been on since the beginning and is still on. Everybody
Ooh.
else. Everybody
Which
else.
one is it? Jax? Old man Jax?
I can't tell you. It'll be spoiling it for you.
No, you got to tell me who's still on at this point.
Okay, there's two. Actually, there's two. There's a recurring cast member. His name is Ken. Tell me who Ken is.
Ken? Oh, that's Lisa's husband.
Okay. And then there's Lisa.
Lisa Vanderpump of Vanderpump Rules. Oh,
And
that doesn't
Lisa's
count.
still
They are the owners of the show and
Okay,
the
but
restaurants that the show takes place
everybody
in.
else that was on from seasons 1 to 11 is no longer on.
Yeah, they got fucking old.
Okay.
Just like us, Matt. That's why we're doing an X-Men podcast.
Yeah. Were you alive when issue X-Men number 7, Return of the Blob, was released?
No, my mother, father, and stepfather all were, though.
I think mine were. Yeah. This was released in 1964. Yeah, we've reached 1964, and yeah, my parents are all over 60. I don't know if this would be. Some of my parents might have been too young to be reading this, though. Right?
Yeah, no, my parents were not reading the X-Men at this time.
If my parents are younger than 65, they would probably be too young to be picking up an X-Men comic and reading it.
My mom,
Like, they might have it in their room, but they might not be reading.
Let's see if listeners can do a little detective work here. My mom was born in the same quarter that Ant-Man debuted. Guess her birthday.
All right, everybody, email mutantmenacepod@gmail.com and guess Pat's mom's birthday. Is this a bad podcast?
No. Let's get to issue 7.
Okay. So issue 7 is, again, we've got Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Chick Stone. I think this is the chunk of issues where Jack Kirby leaves, but not yet. It's been, 3 episodes since we last met the Blob? Am I right about that?
Yeah, he was issue 3.
He was issue 3, so now, okay, so it's been 4 episodes since we've last seen the Blob. People are clamoring for him. We miss this guy. Bring him back. And so what happens is the X-Men had just graduated, and they're all roughhousing after their big graduation picture. And we cut to Mastermind hitting on Scarlet Witch. And that's about the whole of what happens there. Then we cut back to Cyclops becoming the leader of the X-Men, and Professor X, he leaves on unfinished tasks that he doesn't want to send the X-Men on. He wants to go take care of himself. So meanwhile, we go back to the Brotherhood, and there's some more substance here as Magneto goes out to look for the Blob. He decides he can blend into a carnival just in his Magneto outfit because everybody looks weird here. He meets the Blob, asks him to join the Brotherhood. Blob says no. And actually, no, it's before Blob says no. Somebody just is like, "Hey, are you talking to my dude?" And all of the carnival people, all the carnies, attack Magneto. So the Brotherhood has to fight a bunch of carnival folk. They flee. In the midst of it, Blob hits his head and remembers all the memories the X-Men took from him. And so he decides to join up with the Brotherhood to get back at the X-Men. This registers on Cerebro, so Cyclops, calls back all the X-Men who are mostly at a coffee shop listening to beat poetry. And they head out to fight the Blob and to fight the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. In the midst of it, Magneto flings a bunch of missiles at the group and they all hit the Blob. So the Blob goes like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with mutants, evil and good mutants. I'm gonna go back to the circus. And he walks away sadly. And that's the issue. How'd you feel about this one?
Wild that they are putting the Blob through the exact same torture. And as he's going through this exact same torture, his memories are uncovered that he's gone through this before.
Right.
That poor guy. Just the fight is Magneto offering the Blob a position in the evil mutants. The Blob saying, no thanks, I'm happy at the carnival. And Magneto saying, well, I can't let the X-Men get to you, so time to go.
This is also our first appearance of Cerebro.
Yes, which they, even in the issue of the first appearance of Cerebro, they misname it as Cyberno later on in the issue.
Yeah, in the exact same issue, they call it Cyberno. It's a machine that's built into Professor X's desk. It doesn't have the headset or anything yet. And it's so finely tuned that you can put people's names into the slots on its side and it'll detect those specific mutants.
Yes.
So oh, there's 7 mutants, so we have 7 slots for detection.
They have a Blob alarm. Just if the Blob's causing trouble, this light blinks.
This is also the first appearance of the Greenwich Village coffee shop, where Iceman's sort of semi-girlfriend, Zelda, makes her first appearance, and Bernard, who is the poet laureate of the coffee shop, makes his appearance reading his quote housewife's shopping list.
Stanley and Jack Kirby's disdain for beat poets really shines through. I think they take 2 full pages to tee off on the hippies at this coffee shop and how annoying they are.
Yeah, Beast takes off his shoes to let his giant feet out, and everyone's like, "Oh, these feet rule! Let's start a movement based on these feet." And they draw pictures on his feet and hoist them up on their shoulders. Very, very strange.
They even, describing the jazz music, they have Iceman say it's so far out that anyone will be fired for understanding the melody. They don't like the music.
It's
the poetry is literally a shopping list. They're just reading a shopping list, and a bunch of hippies have hoisted Hank off to draw on his feet.
It's so they go. The X-Men go to get changed, and Iceman, he's in the middle of getting dressed, and he just doesn't take off his shirt, and he blames he's just oops, I shattered my shirt. Just take the shirt off. Why didn't you take your shirt off? He ices up and it shatters his shirt and his shoes and his socks. And it's well, why did you do that then?
And he's nude for the rest of the issue. I'm not.
I guess so. They don't really show anything, unfortunately.
They kind of reference it towards the end, but they are also, there's not an opportunity for him to switch back into human form or put on any clothes.
As you said, the Brotherhood show up and they just kind of attack the Blob, just completely unbidden. Well, or they attack all the circus people. The Blob actually attacks them, right?
Yeah, so again, the Blob is left with no choice. He's told that if he doesn't want to join the evil mutants, then he has to die, because otherwise the X-Men will probably recruit him. So he calls out, and then in a great Stan Lee-ism, the narration of the panel says, seconds later, in answer to the time-honored Carney battle cry, a group of husky roustabouts charged the mighty mutant.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, so it's his boss that cries out, "Hey, Rube," which is supposedly, at least legend goes, that is like the carnival cry for, "Hey, I need help here."
Oh, wait, I thought they were calling Magneto a rube. I thought they were saying, "Hey, you rube."
I know. Yeah, no, it is. If you don't know the lore about it, that's the way it seems. But that is like that is again. I don't know if it's true, but it is a carnival legend, at least, that if you yell "Hey, Rube," it is a cry for help.
It's mentioned outside of this X-Men issue, you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There's a lot of literature on it. But here's something funny. I pulled it up to see if there's anything like really concrete that I could, like a concrete example I could give you. And this issue is referenced on the Wikipedia page.
Oh no.
Um,
We're stuck in a loop.
there's this thing where this is a recurring thing throughout the issue. The Blob just like puts people in wrestling moves.
Oh my god. He does it mid-speech each time, too. It's great. He does it to Magneto. Magneto's standing up to him saying, like, if you won't join me, I have no option but to... Oh! And then the next panel is just Blob with Magneto in a headlock. And then later in the issue, Angel comes up and he goes, now listen here, mister, if you're going to mess around, you haven't thought about... Oh! And then it's just... The Blob has him in a big old bear hug. He's not suffering fools.
It's just anytime somebody talks to him, he's just like, hold on. And he just like grabs them in a headlock or a half Nelson, and he's just like,
Wait,
I'm not
why
going to
am I
talk
listening
to
to this guy?
I hate listening to people. So, obviously it ends in a big fight, and the fight isn't anything besides that moment. The fight isn't anything spectacular. Iceman puts him in a block of ice. Marvel Girl comes up finally with the incredibly smart idea of, why don't I just lift Quicksilver off the ground?
Yeah.
Like, he can't do anything if he's just floating in midair, which is such a smart idea, and wild that it took her this long, too. Her powers are so crazily inconsistent. We'll talk about it as the issues go on, but, sometimes she can lift a whole person, other times she can't take ropes off her own hands. So...
She's getting stronger. She's getting stronger.
Is she? Because in this issue, she could lift a person. In like 4 issues from now, she can't take ropes off her hands.
Well, they have pitch on them, but we can get to that.
Oh, right. Yeah. So this is also, another interesting first appearance. So, and again, it ends with just like Blob sadly walking away. Like, oh, I'm sick of all these mutants. But this is also the beginning of a time-honored tradition of the X-Men wrecking aircraft.
Ooh.
They crash it. This is their first helicopter crash.
And it's already not a big deal to them.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, oh, man.
They're in another
now we have to
helicopter
walk
in the next
home.
issue.
So, all right. So why don't we move on? Pat, what happens in issue 8?
Before we move on, I have to mention one line which we can add to the growing list of crazy things that Bobby Drake says. There is a panel where Jean and Warren both have real lines, real dialogue bubbles, and I guess they just needed to add something for Iceman to say in that panel as well. So he says, he's drawn right next to Angel. He says, hey, stop flapping those wings of yours, Angel. You're tickling my ears.
They're just like, I guess they were just saying like, hey, Iceman hasn't talked in a while.
Yeah, he's in this frame. What should he say?
Right. It's not a less is more situation. There's a plot point early on, which I say so loosely, where Iceman is confused about why the diplomas are blank, and somebody has to explain to him, oh, they're just props for the photo. And it's like, did this need to be in the issue?
Right. Beast calls him an idiot for even asking, and then Professor X rolls in, is like, I got you real diplomas.
All right. So let's move on to issue number 8. What happens, Pat?
Issue 8, the uncanny threat of Unus the Untouchable. Do you say Unus? Do you say Eunice?
I say Eunice, but it might be Unus.
I'm going to say Unus as we go.
Okay. And I'll say Eunice. And listeners, it's like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Stop me if it starts driving you nuts. So we open on training as usual. Scott is the new leader and is clearly riding them hard, but because of his overzealous training, Iceman is able to turn to his ice form instead of the crusty snow form that he's been in.
Yeah.
Scott loves Jean. He has a thought bubble very similar to the one that that Professor X had a couple issues earlier, saying, how could I ever tell her my feelings? Yeah. They both love each other. They won't tell each other. Beast saves a child in New York City and hides his identity as he's doing it. And people hate him for it because he must be a mutant. He climbs up the side of a wall. He's hiding his face. The people really don't like him. They imagine he must be up to no good, even as he's saving a child. Scott reaches out to the professor via Cerebro. We find out we find him while he's in the heart of the Balkans in Europe, descending into an almost bottomless cave.
For no reason. Like, we don't know why. He's just doing it.
But it makes it clear that there's nothing Scott can do to help him. Oh, I missed a step. That Beast is so incensed by the people of New York hating him for being a mutant that he says Magneto is right, and he has to tender his resignation from the X-Men, which is why Scott reaches out to the professor. Hank, in the meantime, becomes a pro wrestler. He's using his agility and talent to entertain people. Quickly gaining fame, he goes up against a man called Unus, quickly finds out it's impossible to make contact with him. He's just bouncing off a force field before he can touch him.
It's kind of a cool sequence.
It is. Yeah, it's a really exciting action scene. And then a fun interaction scene with the crowd once he gets knocked out into the crowd and loses the match. Mm-hmm. But as he's in the crowd, he does spot Mastermind. Mastermind and Unus meet. After the match, Unus is looking to join the evil mutants, but he still has to prove himself worthy, finding and beating one X-Man. Trying to plot how he finds the X-Men, Unus actually stumbles upon a bank robbery around the corner, scares the criminals off, and just takes the bag for himself, saying, if I can't join the evil mutants, at least this will hold me over. But the X-Men, looking for a new mutant somewhere in New York, are choppering by and decide to check out the bank robbery. Unus almost defeats the X-Men, but Angel grabs him and hangs him on the top of a skyscraper. They return to the mansion, find the Beast returned to the X-Mansion, working on a device to increase Unus's power. The X-Men are outraged. They assume that he has lost his mind and is now hoping to help Unus to prove himself to Magneto and also join the evil mutants. They attack Beast. He runs out the door and runs immediately to find Unus, uses the beam on him, and increases his power. Unus is thrilled. He makes a quick exit with the X-Men who show up, and then Unus is thrilled about this new power until he realizes he can't touch anything. He tries to grab a pack of cigarettes. They bounce away as soon as he reaches for them. He tries to eat some food. It flies out of his mouth. He goes down to a restaurant to try to get some help. The gang finds him there. He's having a full breakdown because every piece of food they try to serve him just goes bouncing around the restaurant. He is surrounded by food. He's descending into madness. Hank says, okay, calm down. I'm going to use this ray to reverse the effect and bring you back to your normal power levels. And Unus is a changed man. This little lesson really worked. He promises to never try to join the evil mutants again, wanders off into the sunset.
Yeah. Why does nobody ever explain themselves? Like, all it would take, right, is for Hank to say, oh, this will help to stop him. Like, that's all he needs to say. He just needs to say, oh, I'm going to increase his power so he can't eat, and then that'll defeat him. Like, he just needs to say something just so quick. But he doesn't. He's like, I'm not sure what he says, but he just like jumps out the window, right? Like he's just like everyone refuses to explain themselves, and it gets them into so much trouble, which we'll see further in some of the future issues. But it's just wild.
Well, in this case, Scott does try to blast him immediately. As soon as he's like, I'm working on a device to increase his power, Scott says, no, the hell you aren't, and takes his glasses off. But there's also a line that we're seeing a lot more and more in each issue, which is, there's no time for that now, which explains a lot of the lack of communication.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they say, like so many old movies would not have they would not have occurred had people had cell phones. It's the same thing. All of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's plots revolve around somebody not saying one sentence. There's no time to say one sentence. There's there's a lot of cool firsts in this issue. Iceman becoming solid, Scott and Jean professing their love for each other, the first anti-mutant mob.
Yes, that was wild. Before we see, here's something that's wild and unsettling. Before we see the true ice form of Iceman, when he's still in his crusty snow form, they show him with an open mouth, and it's really disturbing.
It's like a void into his head. Yeah.
That gaping maw that you described last episode. It's there.
And it's also the first mention of Lucifer, and obviously the first Unus.
So the first mention of Lucifer doesn't provide anything clarifying. Scott reaches out to the professor just to check in. Last we knew, he was descending into a cave somewhere in the Balkans. And now he says, hey, I can't really talk. I'm on the trail of Lucifer. I'm fucking on the trail of Lucifer. Okay.
Hey, leave me alone. I'm on the trail of Lucifer. Oh, yeah, of course.
Good to know.
All right. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Okay, I just have a series. These are just bullet points of things that I want to say, and if you have a reaction to them, feel free. But number one, the bank robbers are carrying a big bag with a money sign on it.
Giant bag, like a industrial trash bag.
Number two, this is the beginning of Cyclops having numbered and lettered plans. So he yells, Marvel Girl, plan G5 quickly. But the plan G5 is just catch me in the air because somebody threw me. You can just say, Marvel Girl, catch me. Like, plan G5. Like, you don't need numbered plans for that.
There's got to be, if it's something that detailed, there has to be so many maneuvers.
Yeah. Then, I mean, immediately right after he says, Iceman, F12, which just means put ice over top of this guy. Like these aren't multi-step plans. You don't need the numbers. What's my next bullet point is Angel gets... Oh, this is earlier on in the issue. During the Danger Room segment, Cyclops catches Angel in a big bug net.
Which will come into play in a couple issues here.
But it also is echoed later as the Angel's plan for catching Unus is just to put a big piece of plastic over him. And he's like, oh, it'll move when he moves. It's a perfect plan.
Is that not essentially what Hank McCoy did?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, right. Like, oh, if he's trapped in this big net, but the net
he's trapped in a bubble of his own powers.
Yeah.
I feel like he probably could have torn through the plastic. It seems like that wasn't a limit to his power set at the time.
Well, only if he had a knife on him at that moment.
He's thinking in the right direction.
Unus is an interesting character because, like, so a lot of these Kirby Lee characters come back. Obviously Blob becomes a recurring. He drops from being like a lead to sort of just a goofy henchman in the future.
Yeah, sure.
Toad starts as a henchman, ends as a henchman. He's only ever really interesting when Jason Aaron writes him as like the janitor of the Jean Grey school, which is, I think
he's really interesting here in these issues as well. But he's just like in a weird, like, who is this freak kind of way.
Magneto obviously comes back a million times. Quicksilver, Mastermind, Scarlet Witch. The Vanisher, not a huge X-Men villain, but comes back. Unus, really, I think maybe because there's only this one story you can tell about him. He's like the Mr. Freeze. It's like the Mr. Freeze scenario, right? Where there's one big Mr. Freeze story you can tell. And beyond that, he just becomes a henchman with an interesting power. A somewhat interesting power.
That's fair. I like to look at it as he's keeping his promise. He said, you know what? I'm done. I'm going back to entertainment. I promise that I will never do this again.
But he does so many times. He joins the Brotherhood so many times in the future. He's just like a guy in the background. And they don't really deal with him.
He does come back.
Yeah. So
as like an extra.
Yeah, he's very
son of a bitch.
Yeah, I don't know what else he does. I was gonna say at one point he comes back and owns a bar, but that's Avalanche. I think he does have some sort of background role like that in the Utopia era, but I don't remember what it is. Anyway,
we'll keep an eye out for him.
All right, what else do you got to say about issue 9 before we move on? Or 8 before we move on to 9.
I have a couple of bullet points of my own.
Oh, please.
Number 1, they're in New York City initially because they're going back to that coffee shop. I thought that was fascinating. Is this going to be a recurring setting for us?
Yeah.
Which you kind of gave away in the last recap that it is. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. This is not the last we've seen of Bernard or Zelda.
Great. Excellent. We do have a nice moment. So Scott is on his first mission as the leader. We see a moment where he is trying to think a few steps ahead and thinking of the bigger picture, thinking about what could happen if Unus successfully joins the evil mutants and like what would be of the future, and starts even thinking of plans to kind of work around that. It's just a nice moment. Like, hey, Scott is actually evolving and growing here. There is a beautiful moment where Scott, on the opposite end of the spectrum, tries his eye beams against Unus, realizes that they bounce right off. So he says, "Fine," and he says it out loud. "Fine, I'll just punch him instead." And it equally doesn't work. Love this. Hope that too is a recurring theme. If anybody's a fan of our Pokemon podcast, it was there. And
oh my god,
and I sincerely hope it continues.
If you guys have listened to the Pokemon podcast, if you have not, Ash is always trying to punch Pokemon, just nonstop, and people, but there's so many times he just charges somebody and tries to punch them.
Sometimes just an object.
Wasn't there a time that Ash Ketchum was so wrapped up in trying to punch somebody he fell off a set of stairs?
Yes, yeah, that's the first movie.
He didn't get close to the person he was trying to punch. He just fell off the stairs on his way to punch them. Okay, yeah.
And then here's my last note on this issue. Can you imagine the absolute terror of not being able to touch anything?
That's the King Midas story, right?
Yeah, that's chilling. This is very it's very Twilight Zone, which is clearly what they're channeling for a couple of panels here as they illustrate Unus's breakdown. God. And I'm, as a former smoker, when he tried to reach for his cigarettes and couldn't, it really struck me. It put chills down my spine.
You had to put down the book. You had to go take a walk for a minute. I mean, I think this is an echo of the Midas story, right? It's one of the Ovid stories where Midas wishes everything he touches could be turned to gold. He thinks of it as a great power, but then he can't touch his daughter, and he can't touch food, and he can't he just can't have anything. And it's this sort of idea that you have to make yourself vulnerable in order to enjoy life.
Could someone feed King Midas? If his tongue touched food, would it turn to gold?
I think the implication is yes, but you definitely should write a short story where King Midas just has a hack. And it doesn't matter at all. And he becomes super rich and everything goes great for him. And he pays his servant to feed him food. And he's like, oh, it doesn't work on my tongue. I'm fine. This rules.
Maybe it'll be an X-Men story.
But then he'd have to touch all this, like, he still can't get the benefits of human contact unless he does it with his tongue. And
No?
I think he would stop being a popular guy really quickly.
I thought you were going to go with you would never know the visceral feeling of eating a chicken wing in his hands.
Of getting his hands all messy and that being a part of the eating experience. Now, X-Men number 9, Enter the Avengers. Wait, the earth-shattering threat of Lucifer. I have both titles written down. Pat, you have to tell me which version of myself was being an idiot.
So one is on the cover and one is on the title page, which is
Okay.
what is making you an idiot.
Okay.
I believe the title of the issue is The Earth-Shattering Threat of Lucifer. And I'm not an idiot.
I opened it up. It says the Enter the Avengers is the title, and it says right beneath it, featuring the earth-shattering threat of Lucifer. So
Oh shit.
I think we could say I'm double smart instead of an idiot half the time.
I'm the fool.
So it starts out, the X-Men, they're just on a boat. I think they're going to find Professor X finally. Also, this is the first issue with a splash page, which is interesting. Like a splash page that does not tie into the story. It's just, here is an overview of what you can expect. So they're on a boat. Cyclops blast an iceberg, which we'll have to talk about. This makes him woozy, which brings up something that I've always been confused about with Cyclops. Meanwhile, I guess this is some Balkan nation, right? Bavaria. Okay. The Avengers are there following Thor. Like, Thor has his hammer out like he's water witching. And he's just like, this is leading me to evil. I'm getting closer and closer. And as I get closer, it vibrates more.
Literal bad vibes.
They know there's bad vibes. They're chasing bad vibes. And meanwhile, Professor X is deep underground fighting a man with like a green bullet on his head. A big green bullet helmet. He's fighting him with a gun, by the way. And the man says, "Stop, you fool. If you kill me, the whole world is doomed." I'm just going to skip ahead a couple pages. It's because his heart is tied to a thermal bomb. Jumping back, the Avengers are just like questioning random people in the area about the evil. And it scares a tourist so bad that he zooms away in his car and he has no choice but to stop and tell a group of teenagers who end up being the X-Men that there's a bunch of monsters back there. So the X-Men speed off to fight the monsters, find out it's the Avengers. And just as they meet the Avengers, Professor X is like, I can't risk them stopping me and I have no time to explain. Stop the Avengers! So the X-Men just fight the Avengers. The fight is insane. It just involves, we'll talk about this, but it just involves people picking each other up. And other people saying, hey, stop picking me up. Meanwhile, Professor X is still fighting Lucifer deep underground. He knocks him out with his mental powers. And then he has time to tell Thor, hey, this is what's going on. Everyone can chill. So the Avengers are just like, all right, these guys got it. And they go home. It's just so weird. Why they can't help the X-Men, nobody explains. Even Giant Man is like, well,
they must have so much free time on their hands. They're just exploring Eastern Europe for something to do.
Even Giant Man's like, he expresses how annoyed he is that they came all the way here for nothing. So the X-Men follow Professor X's trail underground, and Professor X is using his mental powers to try and disarm the bomb that Lucifer has set up. Again, his powers just do not make any sense here, and he can't quite get it, so he needs Cyclops' precision needlepoint eye beams to just flip a switch. Oh, shatter a fuse, I guess. And they do it. Defeat Lucifer, and then they're like, hey, we beat you, guy. And Lucifer's like, oh, dang it. And then he leaves. And they're like, well, should we
go on.
Should
Get
we
out of
arrest
here.
him? And Professor X is like, nah, this defeat is enough. And that's the end of the issue.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. Here's the thing about Professor X's mission here, as far as I can tell.
Sorry, not to interrupt you immediately when you have a point, but it's the extension of his paternalism, right? Like, just the amount of paternalism he exudes over the X-Men, he's exuding over his enemies now. Like, look, this defeat will make him learn his lesson.
You're not wrong, but I'm going much more surface level here.
Okay.
Professor X is on a vengeance mission for his legs. He reveals that Lucifer, not the devil, this man wearing
You'd
green
be
named Lucifer,
excused for making the mistake,
is the one who he was battling with and lost the use of his legs.
Yeah.
And so as he's trudging through Lucifer's cave, he's got this recurring thought going on in his mind of, this is the man that took my legs from me. And then he goes through the process just to make him feel small, just to say, like, that's the revenge that he wants. He doesn't want to kill him. He doesn't want to maim him. He's letting him go, saying, you'll always remember this. I beat you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that is a good... But this isn't the last we see of Lucifer. He's just going to come back and keep being a supervillain. So it doesn't work. But, okay.
His ego is bruised.
The next time he comes back, he's just a little easier to beat because his confidence is shaken. Do you think his hat looks more like a Edison light bulb or like a bullet?
It looks like a Roman style helmet, like a historically accurate Roman helmet, where it's just like a dome over his entire head except for his eyes.
But it comes to a point at the top.
I think they do that. Maybe I'm thinking of a different era.
It's a weird helmet, and I'm gonna... This is a helmet that becomes very popular in the Silver Age. We're going to be talking about this exact helmet again many times, and not on Lucifer's head.
Ooh.
But
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's another situation where all somebody had to do is say one sentence and the whole thing would be fixed. This like fight between the Avengers and the X-Men.
Yeah, it is. And it could have been Xavier that said that one sentence. Instead, he chose to, like, when he ports into Thor's head and says, Thor, it's me, Professor Xavier. I'm an extremely powerful mutant. Thor is like, oh, okay, this guy seems fine. Let's listen to him. Professor X had just gone to him first instead of going to Scott and saying, fight the Avengers. Then, yes, this whole thing is avoided. The Avengers probably stick around to help.
A thing that bothers me is, so we get the first ever fight between the X-Men and the Avengers. It should be really cool. And there's some moments that are cool, like Captain America throwing his shield, Angel dodges it, Beast catches it, right? That's a cool moment. The rest of the fight is the stupidest shit I've ever seen. Giant Man picks up the Beast. Captain America picks up Cyclops, and Cyclops even just says, hey, put me down. I'm warning you. And the Wasp grabs Marvel Girl's hair, which, by the way, she's wearing her hood again for some reason. They don't explain.
Yeah.
Wasp picks up Marvel Girl's hair and just puts it in front of her eyes. And that's like the entire fight.
You're telling me Jean hasn't prepared for this in any way, that just her hair in her eyes is preventing her from using her powers?
Right. That had to be Danger Room lesson number 1. Like, let's see if we cover your eyes, if you can move stuff around.
The Danger Room lesson we see in this issue is her sewing. She's threading a needle through holes on a piece of pegboard.
Yes. So the Wasp should have said, hey, I have some laundry to do. Why don't that'll distract you while it's just straight up sexism. Right? Like, and later, but when she is back in the battle, all she does is make a bunch of rocks fly around Iron Man in a circle. I guess at this point in time, it would have been really cool to see the moment where Thor smashes Iceman's ice block with his hammer. Like that was probably a cool
Probably.
moment for its time. Looking back on it, it's a little boring, but at the time, like if you're a kid in 1964, you're probably like, oh yeah, I love seeing this guy hit stuff. And I love it when Iceman's ice shatters.
I will say there is one big, beautiful, like 2/3 of the page panel of the X-Men versus Avengers, where you're right. It's just everybody finding different ways to wrap each other up with their powers. But it's
nice to see them all
beautiful.
Together.
It's a real like splash page. It's a real spread from Jack Kirby, just drawing all of the characters in one panel. There's also, another beautiful boat picture in this one. They're on a boat in the beginning, and the boat's approaching an iceberg, and it is just a beautiful picture of an ocean liner with an iceberg in the foreground.
I think it's nowhere near as good as because the last one had these just like beautifully drawn birds, and this one, but it is clearly Jack Kirby likes to draw a boat.
Yeah. Every few issues, he gets to draw a boat.
That was his contract with Marvel. They wouldn't pay him, but every you're allowed to draw a boat.
Right. He was getting sick of drawing the Avengers.
You would too, right?
Now I got to put him in the damn X-Men.
Now, when did Jack Kirby leave Marvel? Because this is towards the end of his term, as if he's an elected official. This is towards the end of King Kirby's elected office. Exploited artist of Marvel Comics.
We're still a few years out from it, right?
Okay, we're nearing the end of his term on X-Men, but you're right, he still stays on until 1970.
And then he came back later, but
I went looking for why did Jack Kirby leave the X-Men, and a lot of people's accounts explain why Jack Kirby left Marvel without explaining why he left the X-Men, and as if that was one of his last titles, but it wasn't. So anyway, we're not quite there yet. Do you have anything else to say about issue 9 before I sit back and you tell me the story of issue 10?
Yeah, first of all, there's a panel where Beast is cheekily serving someone drinks with his damn feet.
Yeah, it's the Cyclops cutting the cake with his eye beams all over again. Like, come on, man.
Yes, this is unsanitary.
Hold on. I do want to talk about this for a second, though.
Yeah.
Are feet really that much grosser than anything else? Like, in the panel preceding it, Iceman is making ice with his hands for Scott to like put on his face. And like, I think hands are grosser than feet.
Dude, this guy is always barefoot.
All right, good point. I'm like, okay, I'm uniquely a man who has never had smelly feet. I don't know why. It is just a characteristic of
That's ridiculous.
No matter how sweaty I get, my feet don't get smelly. I don't know why. So I've never quite understood this feet are gross thing. I've always thought, hands are actually kind of a little bit grosser, but you're right. This man, his hands and feet are interchangeable.
I did not know that about you.
That I don't have smelly feet?
Yeah. I mean, I've never noticed smelly feet on you.
The next couple times we hang out, I'll have to put my feet right directly into your face, and you'll have to just like take notes.
Yeah, I'm so glad we do this virtually.
Well, like you would have to, right? Like that's the thing. Because of this discussion, if we were in the same room, whether you wanted to or
Your
not,
foot would be in my face by now.
Even if I didn't impose it on you, you would have to say, fine, all right, yeah, let me smell them.
Yeah, I would have to verify. One more thing about this issue, again, using my legally obtained original printings of these issues.
Man, I am so sorry. This cost you, I know this has cost you your entire life savings.
My whole fortune.
Apologize for putting you in this position.
It's okay. It'll be worth it. You've promised me we'll make the money back on the podcast.
It's a podcast. They're so lucrative.
This has the very first, I don't know if it's the first appearance, maybe another comic came out before this one, but the very first Merry Marvel Marching Society ad that they put out in all comics. This is the Inception. No, we're beyond Inception. The first collection for $1, which let me actually look that up. $1 in 1964 would have been about $10 today, plus or minus. You could join the Merry Marvel Marching Society, which actually seems to come with some sick stuff. So every member from the very beginning came with a welcome letter, a membership card, a Voices of Marvel record, like a record that had songs, I presume, sung by the stars of Marvel, a scratch pad, a sticker, a pin back button, and a certificate. I'm really jealous about the certificate and the membership card. I can get duped into a lot of things. I get those for $10.
That's fucking wild because, okay, $10 at the time. That's affordable for a kid, right? Like you could probably, if you worked hard enough, you could earn $10 in a day. Like you said, it's $10 today.
Yeah.
$1 in that day's money is $10 in today's money. So if you're a child, you could earn $10 in a day doing chores. And then you get all that stuff and you're part of the Merry Marvel Marching Society for life.
It's like a Patreon subscription, where I guess not, because it's a one-time payment. But they continue sending you stuff.
Do they?
Yes, there's more things that they sent out, like when they were doing promotions. They would send letters and pamphlets and little promotional materials.
I mean, I get, this is a time where Marvel was trying to instill loyalty in their listeners. So I do another podcast about adventure games, and in the 90s, there were two big companies, Sierra and LucasArts, right, that were making point and click adventures. And because I grew up as a comic book fan where the competition was so stiff, like you had to pick a side. You had to either be a Marvel guy or a DC guy, at least as a kid or in the, in the past, right? I assumed that any competing companies were this way. And so I grew up feeling like, I love LucasArts, fuck Sierra. And then I grew up to find out that nobody else treated it as a rivalry in that way. And it was like a little embarrassing. But it was because of this. It was because of these things. Like Marvel started this way back in 1974. Like, we are the Merry Marvel Society. And they would call DC like Brand X.
Yes.
Like ECH. Like,
or the distinguished competition. They had like the
DC, yeah. Anyway, all right. So Merry Marvel Marching Society, maybe we can bring that back. Look, if we ever start a Patreon, we'll call it the Merry Matt and Pat Marching Society, and we'll give everybody.
Yeah, we can't use Marvel.
Are they litigious? Have you ever? I've never heard. Is Marvel litigious? And I know they're owned by Disney. Are they litigious?
Yeah, in my understanding, it's not. They're not that bad. It's like Beatles level.
I've never heard of Disney suing somebody for copyright infringement.
It's actually no longer true for that. I mean, the Beatles, if you use Beatles music, they're still pretty litigious, but they've backed off. Their rights have been redistributed.
They've got to be so diffused by now. Like, how many people, quote unquote, own the rights to the Beatles at this point? It's got to be like 5 different estates and 3 different record companies, and then Michael Jackson's estate too.
Well, it's not me.
All right. Okay. All right, man. Well, our friendship's based on a lie. What happens in X-Men 10?
X-Men 10 is the coming of Ka-Zar. There's even an ellipses in the title to give you that pause. Which I didn't realize is the introduction of Ka-Zar. I know Ka-Zar is just a character that appears I know he had his own line of comics, but he also appears in some of the more lighthearted issues of some of my favorite comics. I didn't realize this was his first appearance.
It's the first appearance of the Savage Land, too.
Yes, although they don't call it that yet.
Really?
Took me a minute to make the connection.
The entire time I was just in my head saying Savage Land as I was reading it. Like, They don't call it the Savage Land? All right. While you describe this issue, I'm going to read just in so in depth here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we open with another training montage. Not complaining. I absolutely love it, but this is another issue that opens with them all training together, except for Warren, who is missing, the angel. He's watching TV in his room. He's watching a news feature that's covering a savage shirtless man and his saber-toothed tiger rescuing a group of lost explorers in Antarctica. There's some satellite feed that he's receiving that's letting him watch this broadcast. Per Cerebro, this man is not a mutant. The professor was already aware, already thought about it, and found out that this is not a mutant. But he does allow them to go investigate anyway because they're pretty bored and they have been itching to use their powers.
Okay, you may investigate the Antarctic wild man, is his quote.
So they land in Antarctica. They descend into a crevasse where they're pretty sure this savage shirtless man ran into. And they discover a tropical land filled with dinosaurs and prehistoric fauna. They are immediately approached by pterodactyls, a flock of pterodactyls that Cyclops blasts out of the sky. And then shortly after that, attacked by swamp men. We come to know them as the swamp men. They're riding ostriches. They capture Marvel Girl as the savage man and the tiger from the news scare the warriors away. He comes in, scares them away, but they already have Marvel Girl in their clutches. Savage Man introduces himself as Ka-Zar. He speaks like a caveman. He introduces his tiger as Zabu. We cut to Warren also being caught by the swamp men in a net. He was out on a scouting fly and just flew into a net.
Wait, Pat, I have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I have to interrupt you real quick. Does this issue include my favorite supervillain, Magor the Killer?
I'll get there.
Okay.
No, I'm glad you asked because there is a misunderstanding. Somebody notices that Ka-Zar has beautiful muscles and tries to touch them, and he doesn't like being touched. So he's pretty rude to them. As we're learning, is their typical response to rudeness. The X-Men attack Ka-Zar. There's a brief spat, and then they are interrupted by Magor, the Killer, last of the ape-man tribe. I'm sorry, last of the man-ape tribe.
And I think listeners can kind of probably tell based on our enthusiasm. He is both of our favorite Marvel characters of all time. We both have Magor posters on our walls. We're just big Magor fans.
Magor the Killer, last of the man-ape tribe. Last of the mayonnaise tribe.
Holy shit, dude. Come on.
Sorry, you're right. I'm getting off track. Ka-Zar quickly defeats Magor the Killer, last of the man-ape tribe, which relaxes him a good bit. He stops trying to fight the X-Men and agrees to help them find Marvel Girl. Back at the Swamp Man camp, Jean and Warren have to fight a T-Rex, which they do. Just as Ka-Zar and X-Men show up at the camp, Ka-Zar summons a herd of mastodons to take down the camp. They do exactly that. It becomes really easy to defeat them. They free Marvel Girl and Angel, and then they offer to be friends with Ka-Zar once all the chaos calms down, and he tells them to fuck off, and he walks off into the sunset.
That is how it ends. And it's just, hey, I don't want to be your friend. Don't come back here.
Yeah.
It is... Okay, here's my impression of Jack Kirby getting the rundown of this issue. All right. Drawing some weird muscle man and T-Rex. What the fuck is that shit?
It is the lumpiest T-Rex I've ever seen. It's like
what the fuck is this?
The T-Rex from Toy Story.
Melting. It is if the T-Rex from Toy Story were melting.
Or like bloated.
It is just such a bad T-Rex. If we at this point have an Instagram or something, we'll have to post pictures of this T-Rex. It's got like the body of a man but with tiny hands and like just a big mascot head. It's so like, okay, this from an issue where he draws a beautiful brontosaurus, right? And some of his action shots in this issue are incredible. Like, clearly he likes Ka-Zar. He's drawing this guy in such dynamic
Beautiful man.
poses, just nonstop. Oh, and by the way, on my hear me out cake for sure. But when it comes to drawing this fucking T-Rex, holy shit.
He's lost. He's putting fatty deposits on all of the dinosaurs, which I think is maybe something he believed.
Yeah, dinosaurs, they were a lot fatter than we think they were, is what he...
Speaking of disrespecting dinosaurs, they enter the Savage Land. Angel is flying around and gets swamped by a flock of pterodactyls. I get that there's not much you can do. If you're being attacked by dinosaurs, you should take action. You should do something about it. But Scott's just blasting him out of the sky. This is a scientific miracle, and he is just
he's the
wasting
first person,
no time.
He's, I guess now the second person to lay eyes on dinosaurs in millions of years. And he just shoots it out of the sky. He's like, let me kill this thing. This is... I think this is a fun issue, especially because there's not like a supervillain in this issue, which I think is fun. Unless we count Magor the Killer.
Magor the Killer, last of the Man-Ape tribe.
I know that's our favorite Marvel character, but also... Here, okay, all right. Bullet points time. At some point, Cyclops says to Angel, no one is excused from postgraduate work. Okay, so they're still students? So nothing's changed? So the whole two-issue big deal about everybody graduating and fucking nothing's changed?
I don't need a reason for them to continue to train. They're a team of superheroes. They don't need to call it postgraduate work.
Now, I don't have any other bullet points, but I do want to talk about the Marvel Girl situation.
Yeah, which situation? That they've got her disassembling and reassembling a rifle in the training montage when the last issue she was working on sewing?
This is her alt-right rabbit hole conversion. From independent woman to sewing to guns. This is exactly the Sarah Palin trajectory, the Marjorie Taylor Greene trajectory. But it is when her and Angel are captured by the swamp men, she goes to he's like, oh, just use your, telekinesis to undo these ropes. And she's like, I can't. They're covered in pitch.
Yeah.
So what this is suggesting is that her telekinesis is like two human hands that like slip off of stuff.
I guess pitch is like tar, right? It's like,
oh, okay.
I think it's sticky stuff, which maybe it's an interesting question, right? Could you using telekinesis unbind glue that's holding two pieces of paper together?
Well, she lifted a human being in the air with her telekinesis.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the strength. Like, imagine just a knot with a ball of tar around it. Are you able just to extract that tar from the situation?
If I can exert the force to lift a man off the ground, I can grab any part of a rope and rip it in half.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like a grown man.
It doesn't.
I can lift a grown man off the ground and just kind of spin him. I am strong enough to tear a rope.
It really doesn't matter anyway, because they forgot to pitch Warren's ropes, the knot around his wrists.
Oh, yeah. I mean, lucky for them, huh? Also, besides the terrible dinosaurs, this is just another really good Jack Kirby Chick Stone collab. Like, the art here is great.
Yes. There's a few beautiful panels here. One is the X-Men fighting the Swamp Men alongside Ka-Zar. Again, Ka-Zar is just in this beautiful man pose.
He's doing this overhand throw, like he grabbed somebody by the spear they were charging him with, and he is continuing to run forward while tossing the man behind him. It's just an incredible panel.
Yeah.
And well, because that's beautiful, but also it's funny because also Iceman is rolling everyone up in a big snowball at the same time.
They love spinning people.
That's their favorite thing.
There's also, is towards the beginning, there's another beautiful panel where they decide to go find Warren. Scott says, I'll go grab him, and then Hank and Bobby both follow, and they're just bouncing down the hallway together. It's a pretty small panel, but it's just really cool. It's they're all in action. Beast is like bouncing down the hall, Scott's running, and Iceman is using his ice slide. But the fun thing about that image is the panel before. Scott is very close to Jean. He's getting a little too riled up, and he's like, oof, I need to go cool off. Why don't I find a reason? I'll just say I'm looking for Angel. And he announces it to the room, and Hank and Bobby are immediately like, I'll go with you. Let's go, buddy. He needs a minute he needs a cold shower, and instead he's getting these two
just
doofuses
doofuses,
literally bouncing behind him.
It's interesting because this is pre Iceman learning how to make ice slides and ride on ice slides. But there is a moment where it looks like he might be doing just that.
It seems like he's maybe creating little ramps for himself to slide up.
Yeah.
The physics are confusing a bit.
Well, physics of Iceman are confusing forever, right? As long as he's moving forward, he doesn't fall from the sky, even if his ice slide isn't attached to anything. I mean, there's bizarre physics around Iceman all around. Also, I do want to say the final panel of Ka-Zar makes it so clear that this is just Jack Kirby's drawings of Charlton Heston.
Oh, yeah.
Or the final page where he's like, where he's telling them to fuck off. It's just a picture of Charlton Heston. Really, it's a Tarzan ripoff, but
I do have to say, Matt, on the very first page of this comic, they explain to you how to pronounce Ka-Zar.
No way, they don't.
They do. It is not Ka-Zar, like you just said.
On the very first page, pronounced Ka-Zar.
The very first page.
Holy shit! I've read this issue 3 times. I've never seen. Well, you can't look. You have no control over me, Stanley. So fuck off. It's Ka-Zar.
Ooh, that's a great point.
All right, issue number
Ka-Zar and Unus.
Issue number 11, The Triumph of Magneto. So this issue opens up with a new Professor X invention, the radar image beam, upon which a super being registers. It seems more like a Reed Richards invention than a Professor X invention, but whatever.
He's a gadget guy.
This super being is so powerful, shatters the radar image beam. Meanwhile, the X-Men are just pranking each other. Cut to a man with very strange hair, like a puffy, bushy head of hair, bushy eyebrows, weird, patchy facial hair. He is renting a room, producing money out of thin air, walking in the air, passing through a wall, and it ends with a first-person shot from his point of view of Magneto and the Brotherhood just saying, like, hey, we've been waiting for you. It's kind of cool. Kind of a cool moment. Meanwhile, the X-Men are out looking for this super being. Cyclops gets in a little dust up with some police. ACAB escapes base due to an Iceman ice slide. Or an ice tube. Sorry, that's what he generally uses these days. He makes a tube, you jump into him, and you pop out the other side. With the stranger, this strange man, the Brotherhood are showing off their powers to him to show him how powerful they are. But the stranger just kind of shrugs them off. He blasts all of Magneto's metal bindings away. He turns the mastermind into literal stone.
Yeah.
And this commotion draws the attention of the X-Men, and they rush in. and begin fighting. The Stranger's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on here. Creates a cone of energy that sucks up Magneto and Toad, and they fuck off, right? This is the moment, now that Mastermind and Magneto and Toad are gone, that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch decide they're going to give up being villains. And they're done with the Brotherhood. They're done with Magneto. The X-Men are like, hey, well, join us. We could use you guys. And they're like, nah, we're going home. It is this exact month, Patrick, that Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch join the Avengers.
Oh, shit. That's actually extremely cool, because when they get to the Avengers, they just show up and they're just like, hey, you might have heard of us, but if you have, we're cool. Please take us in. As I didn't realize it was such a direct...
hang out with us.
Yeah.
Please hang out with us. Yeah, it's Avengers number 16, because I think what's happening at this point is that the X-Men, for a couple months at least, were operating every other month, and the Avengers was monthly.
So they started outpacing the X-Men.
Yeah, they kind of pull ahead. So Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, they're gone. We cut to the Stranger and Magneto and Toad again in this just like dick showing competition, like who's got bigger, better powers. The Stranger does. Spoiler alert, the Stranger is as much better powers than Magneto or Toad. I mean, I have better powers than Toad. The X-Men find out that like Mastermind is alive, but he's just a stone now. So the X-Men go out searching for this incredibly powerful being that turned Mastermind to stone. The Stranger's like, I don't want to fight people. I just wanted some examples of mutants. So I'm going to take these two nerds. And he grabs Magneto and Toad and he disappears from the planet saying, we shall never return.
Zoots him.
In a beam of light. The X-Men head back home on their new helicopter, and there's a scene of Professor X taking the name tags for Magneto, Mastermind, and Toad out of Cerebro. I guess making room for more New Mutants. Then Cerebro does start beeping, and we get like an ominous to be continued.
Ooh.
Do you think, Pat, that they knew what the next issue was going to be when they had this ominous ending?
No, absolutely not.
They're just like, next, the X-Men face their biggest threat of all. Like, literally could be anything.
Yeah. I think they wanted to create a cliffhanger. There's no indication that, like, there's no continuity between this and the next issue. It is just, well, we can get into it in a minute. We'll talk about issue 12. Do you think that do you think they wrote the title before they wrote the issue? Or is this supposed to be ironic, the triumph of Magneto?
100% they wrote the title first. There's nothing about this that is a triumph, right? He loses in every scene that he's in. Yeah.
He looks like an absolute fool, and he disappears forever. The X-Men stand around and talk about it for a little while, saying, oh, I guess Magneto really is gone.
I think we should highlight here the fact that this is like an ending. At this point, the X-Men are graduated. Professor X has defeated Lucifer, the man who took control of his legs. Mastermind is, for all intents and purposes, fucking dead.
Still alive, though.
Still alive, just a stone. Magneto and Toad are off in space forever. And Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver have left the Brotherhood. So there are no more threats for the X-Men to face at this time. And it's also worth noting, this is the last X-Men issue of Jack Kirby.
Yeah. This is the last one he writes. He still gets credit in the next one.
That he paint pencils, you mean?
Or yeah, sorry, this is the last one that he writes through his drawings.
Yeah. That weird nebulous zone between writing and art that existed in.
Let's see. I have to say, so they put this image beam together, which the radar image beam actually seems kind of feasible, right? Especially just you have to imagine that there is a form of radar that can build a better image than just a bleeping dot on a screen, which is what it was back at the time. But this is the first time they've ever used it, and it breaks. Like, it just breaks. They conclude that it means it's the most powerful mutant they've ever seen, but they don't know that. It could just be a malfunctioning piece of equipment. They've never used it before.
Yeah.
It seems like an undue panic. They get sent again to New York City to just walk around and look for a mutant. Angel even verbalizes how fruitless it is to just wander around New York looking for a weirdo. Like, that is the that is the mission.
That's that's the definition of futility.
Actually, speaking of this being Jack Kirby's last issue, he is going nuts here. There is some really beautiful psychedelic art. They go to space for a little while. There's an abandoned factory. There's a whole lot of just like detail. There's a few different individual panels where you get all of the X-Men and Professor Xavier in one shot in like some sort of action pose. He's really putting his heart into this one, which is very cool.
I mean, I think I have to assume he knew this was his last issue, and he was just all right, I'm just gonna kick some ass for a little bit. I'm gonna show people. I'm gonna make them miss me.
There's a fun panel continuing the X-Men's tradition of disrespecting the police. There is a fun panel where they are trying to shake down Magneto because they're looking for a mutant, and they just start picking on a civilian, and he won't take off his glasses. So the cop says, only a guy on the lam would be scared of removing his glasses. That's great. I'm scared of removing my glasses all the time.
Yeah.
Well, there's two more things I want to mention. Number one, we do get a clearer picture of Magneto's goal in this issue, which is reducing the human race to slavery. I don't think he's been that specific up to this point, but that's what he tells the Stranger. The other thing worth mentioning is a single frame of Bobby with his hands on his hips after somebody asks who just pranked me, saying, oh, just that little old frostpot, me.
I got him. Well, yeah. Oh, that was in response to the phrase that I wrote down. Gadzooks, who coated the corner of the room with ice? You could figure. You don't have to ask.
Who else?
You could figure that out. You could definitely just intuit that. Patrick, you are going to recap the next issue for us. But before you do, I want to mention the artist change here. So Jack Kirby continues doing layouts for a while. But what we get in this next issue is a real treat. It is Alex Toth.
Yeah.
Do you know Alex Toth?
Yes. If
listeners don't, he is a Hanna-Barbera artist who is responsible for the creation of Space Ghost. He created Birdman. He worked for DC for a while where he created Black Canary and Rex the Wonder Dog.
I did not know.
When you look back at those Hanna-Barbera like action cartoons and superhero cartoons like Johnny Quest or even Zorro, right? Even the human characters in Scooby-Doo, that is all kind of Alex Toth is the iconic artist of that.
It's his like
era.
Style guide, right?
Yes,
he basically defined the style.
Right. So later when people like his successor, the guy who created the style of like Batman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited and stuff.
Bruce Timm.
Yeah, Bruce Timm is really following the Alex Toth template later on in animation history. But so Alex Toth actually draws issue 12, The Origin of Professor X.
That's right. It's also worth mentioning the lettering is still done by the same person, but now he's going by Sam Rosen, not S. Rosen.
Yeah. That's
the origin of Professor X. We open with Cerebro freaking out to the point where the rest of the X-Men barge into Professor Xavier's office and discover for the first time Cerebro. Only Scott has seen it to this point.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. I hadn't even clocked that.
Well, Scott's standing there saying, "How dare you barge into the office?" And Professor X says, okay, what we need to do immediately is fortify the building. They create an ice wall, they dig trenches, they hollow out logs with Scott's I-beams and store grenades inside of them. And Professor X, as they fortify the place, reveals that a mutant as powerful as this must be to set off Cerebro so intensely must be his brother. Flashback.
Yes.
To the funeral of Professor X's father, who was killed in an atomic blast in New Mexico. Xavier's mom remarries an evil scientist who brings in his son from a former marriage, Cain Marko. Back to the present, the mysterious mutant is breaking through the barriers the X-Men put up while they watch from inside, just proving how powerful he is. He busts through the ice wall. There's some sort of energy beam they didn't mention before, but now it's there, and he doesn't seem to be fazed by that.
Yeah.
This is happening interspersed with flashbacks about Professor X not getting along with his stepbrother. His mother and his stepfather all eventually die. In a flashback, Cain Marko at one point offers to drive Xavier to college, ends up driving him off a cliff as he jumps free from the car. Like, he's driving him, trying to terrorize him. It just seems like he wasn't meaning to drive him off a cliff, but he does. They go a long way to clarify that this is not how Xavier loses the use of his legs. In another flashback, Xavier and Marko are fighting in the Korean War together. Marko deserts. He says, "This war stuff isn't for me. There's a nice cave over there." He walks over and he stumbles into the sacred lost temple of Sidorak, the worst of the dark magics. And despite Xavier's warning, he touches the ruby that's hidden inside this sacred lost temple.
Right.
The inscription on the ruby tells him he's going to turn into a human juggernaut. We see a cave-in. Xavier and Marko are separated, never see each other again. We come back to present day. The X-Men activate lockdown mode, another fortification that they just forgot about until now. Steel shutters come down over the doors and windows. Juggernaut breaks through them anyway, pushes the X-Men aside without any effort. He is finally face-to-face with Xavier. We see his full, beautiful form. And he promises to defeat and kill Xavier. To be continued.
He's just kind of a trash can man.
Yeah, I think it is an amazing look. He is so bulky, and they have put a helmet on him to eliminate any need for a neck.
And they're like, you know what we have to show off in this character is his beautiful calves. So you can see, so, you know, he's got full armor on, and he's got armbands, and he's got boots, and he's got a helmet. But those naked calves really teach you something about this man's musculature.
Yeah.
This is your fucking rules.
This is good. I think Xavier's being very weird about telling this story in this specific moment. There are a lot of, there's no time for that now. I'm telling a story moments. And the story isn't relevant to how they would defeat this man or protect themselves. It's really just to say, yes, he's very powerful because he found a magic artifact. But all that aside, yeah, this is thrilling. Like the way that you're page by page seeing two different stories develop so cleanly, where the Juggernaut is slowly making it through all their fortifications, and where Xavier is clearly building up to revealing just how big and powerful this guy is.
One of the things about this issue is also, like, it makes it hard for this podcast, is it's not that ridiculous. It's just kind of good. It's just kind of a good issue of comic books. There's some ridiculous stuff. Like, for example, even just naming Cain Marko Cain is like a little on the nose, right?
Was he the good brother or the bad brother?
And again, like, there's, like you said, there's all these fortifications they set up. Some of them are absolutely silly, but some of them are really fucking cool. And it is like, it is the first issue of X-Men where you want to keep turning the page, where you're not like, okay, what's going to happen next? It's like, oh my God, what is happening? Who's coming? What? Well, we know it was Juggernaut because we have been X-Men fans forever. But it's still like, if you didn't know that and you were reading this issue completely sight unseen, this would be so exciting.
Yeah, very reminiscent of like horror comics of the time, of just
Yeah.
the creature approaching and the way that they panel that out.
And it's our first real to be continued. So so as a kid reading this, you're like gaming out, oh my God, there's only like a couple pages left. How are they going to defeat this guy?
Yeah.
How can they possibly defeat this guy in time?
And then they don't.
They don't. He just shows up. They're doomed. So the next issue, they all die, and it was a really nice podcast for these two episodes.
That's the end.
Also, this is the first example of the Iceman ice slide.
Oh yes, he's moved on from tubes.
Where he's propelling himself by creating an ice slide underneath him. So this was an Alex Toth invention, I guess.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Alex Toth.
Could have been in Kirby's layouts, but
a couple of very silly things that yes, this is a very good issue. This is like a step up from what we've read so far, but there are a couple of moments that I have to mention.
Okay, please.
Number one is both take place in flashbacks. The first one is Professor X is talking about like getting his powers and how he learned to use them. One of those things is becoming a star quarterback in high school because he can predict the defenses so well.
It's again this idea that his mental powers can help him do anything. It also protects him from a car crash later.
Protects him from a car crash.
Not that he sees it coming, just that his mental powers shield him from damage, which doesn't make sense.
He also uses it. I think this is more or less sensical, more nonsensical. He uses it to become a track star because he can predict when the other runners are getting tired. I get that there's probably some advantage there, but I don't think enough to win you a championship.
If you weren't a great runner and you could tell when somebody was gearing up for their next like second wind, it would just be more demoralizing. Like, oh, man.
But so because of this, he gets all sorts of trophies. Kane Marco is very jealous of all his trophies. In one of their spats in this flashback, Kane Marco is getting violent and straight up saying like, I am going to wreck you. I'm going to beat the shit out of you. I'm going to ruin your life. And he starts smashing his trophies to bits. Professor X says, I can read his thought. He's in a thought bubble, obviously, but I can read his thought. First, he'll break my trophies, and then he'll beat me up. And I don't think he needed to read his thoughts to understand that. This is the panel makes it very clear that he is the next victim.
You know what it does do? Okay, so I was thinking about your thing about his sports prowess, and I think it does come into play later, right? Like, there's a point in time where Professor X is a physical member of the X-Men. It's not going to happen for 20 years, but there's a point in time where Professor Xavier joins the X-Men physically on missions, and it matters that this is set up that Professor X actually is a physically fit dude. He is a strong, athletic man. And it's interesting that they set this up this far back.
I'll take your word for it, because there is a panel of him stiff-arming a safety in a football outfit, and it is hilarious.
I don't know what that means, but I believe you that it is an impressive football move.
So we end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Our first real cliffhanger. And that makes this
podcast
end on a cliffhanger. Juggernaut is there. The X-Men have been knocked out. There's nothing standing between him and crushing his nerdy fucking dork brother, Professor Xavier. I wonder what happens.
If you see another episode, that means that they made it.
Or we just have one issue to recap.
Yeah.
Pat, how do you feel about this run of issues?
I think it's getting good. Number one, Kirby more and more is caring about the artwork as he goes, and Alex Toth pops in. He's doing some really cool stuff. Hopefully that continues to be a tradition, just high effort and very detailed artwork.
Yeah.
The writing is still very Stan Lee.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which,
And
God bless him, the man.
It'll be for another 10 issues or so, right? Like we still have a lot of Stan Lee to go.
But I mean, they're building a bigger world. They're developing a greater set of villains.
Yeah.
And I really love, so you were talking about how a lot of this is supposed to just be weird, right? Like at the time, you would see the X-Men on a comic shelf and you'd be like, this is bizarre. I am going to check this out.
Yeah.
I think that's especially applicable if you look at these as like Archie comics, because I think these issues make it really clear that they're trying to, like I said in the last issue, really balance that fun personal life stuff with the action-packed stuff. They really explore it here, and they're probably going to explore it for a while, right? Like the will they, won't they relationship, the eventual maturing of Iceman. It's just, it feels like the overall story of the X-Men didn't get pushed too much forward in these 6 issues, but they've built a framework to tell a shit ton of weird stories.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, so this feels like I said, this feels like a wrapping up of the Jack Kirby era. They are bringing the sort of overarching Brotherhood Magneto saga to a close. But they are also opening up these other doorways, right? They are opening up the Savage Land, which they didn't call it that. And they're introducing the X-Men to the Avengers. They're bringing Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver into the broader X-Men or Marvel universe. And then, of course, this ends with the introduction of Juggernaut and the implication that there are origin stories to tell of all these X-Men.
Yes.
Right? We have the origin of Professor X. So we're going to see, we can assume eventually, well, what did all these other guys do before they were X-Men?
There's also, I know we made fun of it, but there's that moment where Professor Xavier is just like, oh, I'm exploring, I'm deep underground in a cave in the Balkans. Or the moment in the next issue where he's like, oh, I'm chasing Lucifer. He's the one that broke my legs.
Yeah.
It's
this idea that there's more to Professor X than we've seen.
Yes, there's a past to dig into. They're not just setting them up for more stories, more future stories. They're setting them up to explore their pasts and to yeah, which is what you were just saying, but prettier.
All right, so do we have a Pat's Deals and Steals segment? That we should have a theme song for this.
I dug one up, not a theme song, but a steal and deal for $1, which we established earlier was about $10 in 1964.
So you could either join the Merry Marvel Marching Society or
grow 2 living monsters in your own room. Without a doubt, the most incredible biological wonder you have ever seen. Each of these 2 hair-raising monsters is completely different. Just place one in a colorful space grotto supply and watch it come alive. Actually grows for weeks and weeks of thrilling fun. As these monsters grow, they become so scary they will make even your closest pals gasp in terror at the awful sight. These spooky, kooky things from another world change your ordinary room into a living chamber of horrors that only the bravest souls will dare to enter. Complete with giant accessory kit, you get a botanical growth control center based upon the same principles now under study for the use in real space voyages to the planets. With your scientific kit, you will actually control the life and growth of each of these strange cosmic creatures. Let me describe this issue to you. If you've ever seen the movie Heavy Metal, it is 2 disfigured psychedelic bleary-eyed monsters with green
Okay.
hair growing out of their heads. Or the conclusion I've come to is that this is an early Chia pet. This is clearly like a clay sculpture of
Okay.
some
All right.
funky monster-looking thing, and you plant something, and
Yeah.
the Chia grows out the top. It does come with 2 botanical hair-raising monsters, a space grotto, a fully equipped control center, a flexible hydroponic biotank, crystal plastic hydro tray, a real
Oh my
working aqua gauge, and illustrated monster growing instructions, all for $1.
That's a steal, man.
Yeah, truly is.
How could I not get that?
My only criticism is, as you heard me read earlier, it feels like they wrote 3 different sets of copy for this and just put it all in the same ad.
I mean, okay, so you're saying they send you and it's just like a ceramic thing and you pour seeds in it and they just grow.
Yeah, let's break
out
this
of the
down.
ceramic thing. Okay.
2 botanical hair-raising monsters. The pot, the receptacle, right?
Okay.
Space Grotto Astronarium. I think that's like a little aquarium. It's like a little diorama set. Fully equipped control center. What do you think a control center does on a Chia pet?
What does a control center do?
Is that
I could not possibly guess.
flexible hydroponic biotank, which I'm guessing is seeds.
Okay, yeah.
Crystal plastic hydro tray that you can put under so when you water them, the water doesn't go all over the place. And illustrated monster growing instructions, a basic kit on how to water these plants.
It's so wild. They don't include pictures. They only include illustrations, and the illustrations are clearly exaggerated.
Oh, yeah.
I just
It does not
really
look
want
like
to
that.
see one of these fucking monsters.
I wish there was actually a name of the product here. It's purely description.
Well, yeah, I've noticed a lot of them are, and I'm just really I think I don't know how we go find I don't know how we go find them. It does say hair-raising monsters in quotes. So maybe they were called hair-raising monsters. In fact, there was a TV commercial from well past this called Hair-Raising Monsters, and it was like Chia, but not it was like a piece of cardboard, not a ceramic.
Oh, so this is just a picture of a monster that you can grow a plant behind.
Yes, and it seems like it fits the description. Based on this commercial, he peels back a thing, he dips it in one beaker of water, then peels back a thing, and then dips it in a second beaker of water. Yeah, he puts some goop on it, dips it in a second beaker of water, and then it grows. So I imagine the control center is like a thing that holds just 2 glasses that you have to have from your own house.
It's a miracle of life, Matt.
Miracle of life. Life finds a way.
Life finds a way. You had it out of order there.
So everybody, thank you for listening to Mutant Menace. You can email us, mutantmenacepod@gmail.com. Do we have an Instagram yet, Patrick?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, you can find me on the internet, Matt Aucamp, AUKAMP. That's Blue Sky, Instagram, wherever. You can check out my other show that's about video games. Save Your Game is what it's called. Find that wherever podcasts are. Thanks to Krills Wilson for our intro music. And we'll be back next. What about Thursday?
That's what we said last time. I love Thursdays. I think it's a great day in general.
Come back here next Thursday. We'll talk about the next exciting block of X-Men issues. We'll find out if Juggernaut just kills Professor Xavier at the beginning of next issue or not. And as always,
remember, Homo sapiens just aren't worth it.
Don't ask me, pal. Ask the camera.